Well, hi, everybody. It's 10:30 Mountain Time, and welcome to the Precision Decision webinar hosted by AGvisorPRO. My name is Rob Saik, and I'm your host for the event. And AGvisorPRO is an agnostic and unbiased professional agricultural network, an ecosystem for agriculture. And all of these panelists are available, and all of the companies are available on AGvisorPRO. And the theme of this particular webinar is from the top down and the bottom up. And so we've got Kevin Krieg with us, and Kevin is business development with Intelinair. He's going to talk about top down. Kevin's got a big background in precision ag. And he's done a lot of work with John Deere, a little bit of work with Case IH, and now he's a business development with Intelinair. I'll let him tell you about the company. Bottom up, Cory Willness is no stranger to precision ag. Cory's been a pioneer in developing strategies for dealing with analytics from soils and has been in the consulting game for over 20 years. The developer of SWOT maps and also the founder of Croptimistic, and he'll tell you about that. And then Igor Tihonov is with us from Sweden. So Kevin is from Des Moines. Cory is from Nakim, I think that's right. Saskatchewan, Cory, is that right? And then Igor Tihonov is with us from Sweden. And Igor, if Kevin is coming top down and Cory is going bottom up, Igor is just right above the crop because he runs a drone organization, a drone technical company out of Sweden. So with that introduction, and their bios are inside of the registration that you all brought on board, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. And Kevin, you're going to tell us a little bit about Intelinair and what you do as a company from the top down and how that figures into a precision decision.
You bet. So yeah, thanks, Rob, and welcome everyone. Glad to be here. So yeah, what Intelinair does through our Ag MRI product is we take remote imagery, machine data, weather data, bring that all together through computer vision, machine learning, and then data analytics to be able to help serve farmers and retailers for getting insights on their crops. So as Rob mentions, right, the over the top, we scan all of the fields with airplanes or satellites and drones to be able to gather that information and feed into our system. And then how retailers and farmers can use that is they can use it to go out and scout their fields. Or if our system detects an issue with the emergence of the crop, with a crop health issue, weeds that are impacting the field or disease, then we can also alert them to those issues in the field. So one of the ways we like to think about it is we are scanning the whole area of large geographies, narrowing that down to, well, which fields are potentially having an issue, or even which fields are performing well. And then specifically, well, where at in that field is the issue, or where the field is going really well to be able to adjust your management decisions at that. So that's kind of inside in-season stuff. And then we also do a little bit of the farm intelligence, be able to help them understand how well their products are performing. And then also nitrogen management to be able to better do that from a precision perspective.
So Intelinair, I think Intelinair can amplify or better help agronomists, retail agronomists, or farmers. I mean, if you've got 50 fields, or you got 500 fields, or 250 fields that you're looking after, waking up in the morning and getting an alert as to where in your geography there could be a problem, where in the field there could be a problem, I think is kind of a big deal. Cory, you've been concentrating a lot on soil, water, and topography, and you've been working really hard in that area. Let's hear from you as to how do you guys figure into this precision ag game and from the bottom up. Let's talk a little bit about your strategy, what you guys do as a company.
Thanks, Rob. Well, Croptimistic is an ag tech company. We have software, hardware, and basically a process. So the SWOT Maps brand is very well known, I think, and that's most people migrate to it when they want a very detailed, like, soil variability map to use as a zone map for sampling and soil applied prescriptions of fertilizers and seeds and things like that. So that's kind of our core business. But I would say, that's most where people start is like the science and the agronomy of it and understanding if it's a good solid fit, and that's where our market starts. But in the end, the company really is about like building a precision services network. So the biggest thing that we found as people that actively work in this industry, so in Western Canada, Croptimistic has its own farmer services division that works direct to farmers. And I don't know, maybe there's 40 staff or something there that go out and execute swap maps out in the field with farmers. But then our core business is working with partners internationally. So Canada, US, and Australia are core areas where there's other service providers that utilize our ecosystem of hardware, software, and process for a start to finish, precision services platform.
So Cory, basically, if you're an independent retailer or you're a retailer or agronomist, you can subscribe to Croptimistic technology, layer your own agronomy on top of it, and go to the field, right?
Yeah, I kind of refer to us sometimes as like the Starbucks of precision ag, where, everyone knows what the Starbucks brand is, but you might go to a Starbucks in an Indigo or something. So we don't, well, all our partners operate independently as their own business, and Swap Maps is just the brand of precision ag, soil applied maps that they would use.
So we have an interesting footprint here too. Kevin Krieg and Intelinair is North American based. They're working internationally a little bit, but the real footprint is really the Corn Belt, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. They're strong in that area. That's really where they're driving. Although they're taking their technology broader afield to Canada, etc. Cory started out in Western Canada with a deep footprint and is going broad. And I think Wes right now is in Australia, taking your product into Australia, Cory. And then we have Igor. Now, Igor Tihonov, and Igor works out of Sweden, very much on the international front. Igor, if Kevin is top down and Cory is bottom up, and kind of I'm framing that conversation, you're just kind of above the crop with your drone technology. Can we talk a little bit about what you do and how you do it as a company?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So Solvi is a software for drone imagery analytics for agriculture. So that's our main focus. So we actually do the software only and not provide the direct services to farmers. But what's interesting is that our service is really available worldwide. So it's not tied to a specific crop or country. So anyone who has a drone can go out, fly their field, and just create an account, upload the data, and do the analytics within a matter of 1-2 hours usually, and get the insights. So that's an interesting aspect. And when we look at who uses our service, it would typically be either the agronomist or service providers who work with growers. So they use this wealth of data that the drone imagery can provide as an additional layer to satellite imagery, soil maps, and so on, to just provide better service and better decision making. And also another area where our product is widely used is R&D. So it can be both educational and commercial breeding companies who work with field trials. So drone imagery can be really useful there and make the process of assessing the trials and extracting plot level data so much more efficient. So yeah, that's what we do.
So it's kind of interesting because when you think about what the introduction has been, I mean, Intelinair leverages their technology through agronomists, retailers, and farmers. Cory and your company started to ground truth this technology really in Western Canada, but now you're taking that technology internationally, make it available. And Igor, with your Solvi agro company, can also share that technology with whoever wants to use it. And that's why I was so interested in putting together this panel. I want to share an image with you right now to set the tone as to how big the opportunity is for agriculture. A little while ago, I was speaking at the North American Equipment Dealers Association, and we had Goldman Sachs at that particular conference. They said that the total addressable market for precision ag is $265 billion globally. Now, we're not there today, but globally, $265 billion that precision ag, that's the market, and that market can steal margin, can steal or displace some of the revenues as follows. $60.5 billion in fertilizer could be applied more efficiently. John Deere just brought out Exact Shot, so they're knocking down 40% of the fertilizer as a pop-up. $62 billion of crop chemicals could be applied more efficiently. $12 billion worth of seed could be applied more efficiently. We could knock down our diesel consumption. We could knock down $50 billion worth of labor, and we could increase yield by $77 billion globally by implementing precision ag strategies. When I saw this number, it resonated with me. First of all, it's a massive number, and it sets the tone as to how big the future is for precision agriculture. So starting with you, Igor, the question is, why has it taken so long? Why is it so difficult for precision ag technologies, whatever that definition is? Why is it taking so long to make it and it be adopted? I mean, it took six to 12 years for swath guidance or auto steer to be adopted. We don't have that time. Agriculture needs to adopt technology faster to reduce our environmental footprint. We have to increase output. There's no more land. Igor, why is this taking so long?
I think one of the factors is just the seasonality of agriculture. If you develop the new technology, it will take at least 2-3 years to kind of R&D phase, just because you will typically need to kind of run through the data, compare with measurements on the ground, and within one season you've probably got, like, depending on what exactly you're developing, you've got 1 or 2 chances to do that. As an example, we've been involved earlier on in a research project where we're looking at how drones can be used to identify the weeds in the cereal crops, and then create variable rate spraying maps for that. So it's been a 3-year project where, like, the first year we were figuring out how we should fly the drone, how low should we take the images, what cameras we should be using. Then the second year was actually collecting the data and like missing the gaps from the first year that might have happened, and then develop the algorithms and the technology. And then you have the third year to actually validate that in real world conditions and cross-validate across different fields and so on. So the R&D phase can easily take 2-3 years. And then when you implement the technology in the market and actually among the farmers, that's kind of like the same cycle. They usually will want to test the new product on a smaller scale in the first season, and then maybe if it works well, like increase the usage in the second year and so on. So if you look at it that way, like this is like at least 4-6 year cycle to like develop the product and get it into the market. So I think it's at least one of the factors that it's taking so long time to kind of adopt the technology.
You know, it's obvious, but when you put it that way, the way you put it, and you think about how long it takes to get a technology finally verified and adopted at farm level, it takes tenacious entrepreneurs, and it takes a lot of money to keep this thing going. Cory, you've been I would call you a tenacious entrepreneur, and it's taken, like, I mean, yeah, what, 10 years to become an overnight success, I think that's what they say. But it's been a long journey. And again, same question to you. And that is, you know, a lot of people still have articles going in the paper saying variable rate technology, precision ag doesn't pay. But you've been working this angle for a long time. Why do you think it's taking as long as it is for this technology to be adopted at field level?
Well, I got a few, and I'll list them pretty quick. One is, I think that a lot of the technologies that kind of got us here won't be the ones that we're doing in 10 years. A lot of them are sort of easy and fast, right? Things like grid sampling, things like using a satellite image, or, you know, there's still plenty of platforms out there. You download a single image and go do variable rate. Well, that doesn't work, right? So it's just not that simple. And so complex solutions to complex problems take a long time to develop, right? And so that's one of them. I think another one is lack of consistency. It's a very confusing market right now. So the slide you showed means there's thousands of startups in the space doing thousands of different things, and everyone's very confused and they don't know what they should do, and they hear a lot of mixed messages. So that makes it tough. Cost. I mean, the cost to use a lot of this equipment, the cost for services. I mean, it's not cheap, right? This is a fairly in-depth type of a thing. And then probably the biggest one for me is just execution, right? Like I find in our business that there's many steps to doing this. There's lots of people selling like single things. Like you can have a great piece of software, you can have a great piece of hardware. But you know, we call it a 12-step process, and you have to like Igor mentioned, like the seasonality. Well, sometimes by the time you need to get the guy a prescription made to the time he wants to go and put it in the field is 48 hours or less, right? So you have to have systems in place and people in place to execute. And if you fall down in execution, the farmer never comes back, right? If you slow down seeding or something doesn't work, that's it, you're done. So you don't get a lot of chances, and you know, those would be my key factors.
When you talk about, we'll circle back to that. I want to circle back to the execution and the implementation. And I have a term that I'm using with people that we need more farm technology integrators. And I know you've got you're constantly looking for more people to fill that gap, you know, that farm technology integrator. Kevin, what's your thought? Your technology with Intelinair probably of the three has the biggest ability to scale. Cory's talk, we'll come back to him on soil, water, and topography. And you said, Cory, when we were getting ready for this, that you know the soils or fields change very slowly over time, but year on year, Kevin, you know, a depression might in 1 year could be good, and a depression the next year could be flooded and be bad. Let's talk a little bit about from the top down. Why do you think some of this sensing technology that you're using to complement agronomy work at field level is taking so long?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it to me goes back to, you know, the yield equation, the genotype, the environment, and the management decisions make up your yield, right? And as Cory mentioned, right, that's a very complex formula, right? And there's a lot of, you know, interdependencies there. And so some of the challenges is you haven't been able to see a direct line to your bottom line by using some of these precision ag technologies, because how much of it was at the environment that year versus the genotype versus your management decision, right? And really, you know, you can pick the seeds, you can pick your management decisions, but you're still relying on that environment. So I think as more of these solutions come out that help you manage that within the season and be able to make management decisions based on the environment that has been given to you that year at that time, plus with the seed and other decisions you've made, that's where, you know, it's probably what's holding it back right now, is that there hasn't been that clear connection between, hey, the decisions that you can make as a farmer and how that impacts your bottom line. I mean, I look at things like section control, rate, you know, control, those types of things. Those have been adopted a lot more, but there is a
section control still is not adopted as widely as I'd like. That thing pays off for itself very quickly.
Yes, right. So in the situations where it does, right, then there's a direct line from that ROI of investing in that back to that. So we got to put that same connection in there for these, you know, precision ag decision type software solutions. To be able to have that where your decision has a direct impact on your bottom line, and the tools help you make a better decision.
So from a standpoint of, you know, using the three technologies here, I might use Intelinair to find out where there's variability across my farm or my trading area, where the variability is. But at the end of the day, I still have to figure out why the variability is there. Then I have to have a starting point. Cory, there's been a lot of debate in the media this past year about the, you know, are our fields variable enough for precision ag to pay? You know, my camp, I believe the answer is yes. Fields have variation in soil structure, electrical conductivity and salinity. But this has been a bit of a hot button, and I want you to talk about it. Like there are places where this works, and others. The soil is where it all starts. So give us some thoughts on that, Cory.
Well, like, I guess you could say, let's start at what's not variable. You could go into perfectly flat, one soil type, irrigated, tile drained, those types of fields where you could say, well, you know, that there's probably not going to be much variability in a field like that. So, but having said that, we were just on a call looking at pivots in Washington and Idaho and different things in the potato industry. And it's like, you'd swear that it should be uniform, and you can see that it isn't, right? So,
and so this wasn't a field that had a lot of topography changes. This is.
Well, and I mean, so if you go to the Red River Valley, for example, it's an area that's very, very flat, one soil type, but from year to year, you can still see huge variability, and it's from water, right? And probably one of the most dominant factors in terms of variability isn't always like that there is a soil variability, like with texture or organic matter and those type of topography. It's actually water, because you can go to those Red River Valley fields, and in a wet year, if they get the same amount of rain as a real pothole area, they'll have 30% of their ground that's dead and has nothing. And so will a pothole area. So, you know, water variability is probably one of the biggest drivers, actually, not actually when people start thinking of soils like themselves being the variable factor.
And when we start to build a map and start to build it from the ground up, you've got to, so when you get out in the field, what's the mechanism? How do I get my first map? What's the procedure?
Well, the typical method that we use now is a swap box, which is an EM device, and it sends all the data directly to our server.
What does EM stand for, Cory?
Electromagnetic induction. So it's like similar to a Veris topsoil mapper, EM38, those types of devices. It doesn't really matter. We can use any of that form of data, which is sort of the only real topsoil properties mapper that's affordable right now. Like, there's lots of other tools out there, but it's hard enough trying to sell someone a $25,000 tool, much less someone, well, I got a better tool. Yeah, well, it's 80,000 or 150,000. Like, you kind of work with what you got. So it's not a perfect tool, but it does measure the soil. And then we have accurate topography and water modeling. That's probably been the key thing. And then we can use, if there is a lot of bare soil, then you can use soil color or some type of remote sensing soil color product, which can work really good. But in a lot of areas, like in Western Canada, for example, where it's no-till and there's trash all the time, you can never see the soil, so it doesn't really work there. So there's not like one single way of always doing things, but I would say the most common ways are EM mapping and topography and water modeling.
So you're trying to get consistency in the map. So I look from field to field or region to region, and it always means the same things to me. Is that right?
Correct. Like the original swap maps that get built are just a relative variability map. So we make it like zones 1 to 10, and a 1 is like the driest part of the field and the 10 is the wettest. Like, that will be consistent. Doesn't matter what country you're in, but the specific soil types that are related within that field, or, you know, the absolute soil test values and the soil properties and organic matter contents and things like that, will be very specific to the local field and region.
So I, as an agronomist, could use that map, and I start to build in, layer in, fold in my agronomic recommendations or my planning on top of that, right?
Yeah, and we also I'm not on the panel to talk much about the yield potential side, but we obviously have a soil type map, and we also have like a yield analytics side where you say, well, what's the yield of a zone going to be?
Okay,
you might
cool.
have
All right, so that's really a good place to bounce back over to Kevin. So agronomically, we set our goals in place. Cory, you've nicely done there with the yield targets. Of course, that's part of the equation. We start to grow the crop, and this is where Kevin Intelinair's technology starts to fill in, because, you know, even in the Corn Belt, southern Iowa all the way down to Oklahoma and stuff really dry this year, and then we had other areas that were wet. But this is where you guys start to filter in and showcase where the problems might be. Talk a little bit about the kind of things that you guys can monitor and the alert system that's available to retail agronomists or farmers.
Yeah, so I mean, we try to cover the whole season with our solution. And so that really means capturing the imagery and the weather data, the machine data throughout that whole season. So typically up to like 13 times throughout the year. So in the beginning of the year, we're really looking for the soil conditions, the field conditions, right? So how well was your residue management from the previous year? Any impacts on that? Then we start measuring the emergence of the crop. So how well did it emerge? You know, do I need to go back and replant, right? Do I have some of those low spots that held water and I didn't get a very good stand? I need to go back and replant that. We can also then start looking for where the weeds are impacting your crop. And if you had the spray data in there, did any of the weeds survive your spray application as well, to go back out there and get those taken care of before the yield is impacted by that. So that's kind of the early season stuff. And then we really start shifting over into the crop health. And we start picking up crop health, you know, on corn in that V4 timeframe, early enough to be able to give you time to make a decision if you need to add anything into your next herbicide pass or not. So that's really why we try to use high resolution imagery across the board in order to do that, so we can focus in on the crop, seeing how healthy the crop is, and then making those management decisions. Do I need to, you know, accelerate this crop? Do I need to do something to, you know, really maximize yield because things are looking really good right now at the time of year? Or do I need to back off my plan because maybe things haven't gone quite so well at that point? So that's the crop health side. And then we get a little bit later season into even disease detection. So we have thermal imaging on these sensors as well, and we can detect where disease is at. So all of those things then too, right? We're monitoring the entire field, fence row to fence row, ditch to ditch, however you want to look at it, across the entire field. And then if we spot areas of that field that's having an emergence issue, having a crop health issue, having a potential disease, we will then alert the user, whether that's the retailer or the end farmer, or it could be both, to where those issues are at. So as you know, labor is tough, as managing large acres is tough, you can then get those alerts, as you alluded to, Rob, in, you know, every morning that you would wake up and there could be new alerts to your fields to say, hey, these are the ones where we need to go out and focus and figure out what our game plan is for those to, you know, either correct them or fuel them more to get your yield goal that you set at the beginning of the year.
So the overlap of, you know, what Cory was talking about, which is this foundational layer of the soil, and then making your agronomic recommendations. You plant the crop, you put your RX files into your variable rate planter, air seeder. You do, you get the field sown, and then Mother Nature starts to take over. And you guys are kind of monitoring and working with that variability of what is being handed out to us during the course of the growing season. Now, you have 3 different layers you can pull in. You can pull in satellite, and I think you're working with Airbus, which is 3-meter resolution. And then you can pull in, am I right on that?
Half-meter resolution. Yes, so that's what we really, I mean, focus on getting the decision made earlier in the season while you have time to react.
Okay, so that's cool. So that gives you scale. And then Intelinair started out and still relies a lot on aerial imagery. Can you talk a little bit about the acquisition and how the resolution is of that?
Yeah, so the aerial imagery, I mean, it's on, you know, Cessna type airplanes these sensors go on, and they can, you know, basically either a 10 or 15 centimeter, 4 to 6 inch resolution per pixel. And what that allows us to do is, you know, depend on the soil condition to really pick out the emergence, you know, fairly early in the season. You know, with the 10 centimeter one at V2, we can start picking out emergence. And with that resolution, then what we can do is we can focus the signal for the NDVI, the crop health, essentially, on where those plants are growing. So when, you know, a corn spacing at 30 inches, we can put that 4-inch pixel right on top of the row of corn or soybeans, whatever it happens to be, and measure just the crop health and not have the soil impact on your NDVI signal. So that's really how we get that early season focused on the crop side of it without any of the noise that traditional other NDVI type of signals would have.
Perfect. So we've got satellite imagery that gives us scale, aerial imagery that gives us a higher resolution, but you got to fly the planes, and so you've got these grids that you fly. But if we want to get down to real resolution, like individual plant resolution, Igor, this is really where you come in. I want to talk now, shifting over. So, Cory provides us this base. We have the agronomics. We start moving this in. Cory's team starts using remote sensing to find out if there's a problem in the field, or leveraging Intelinair. And then all of a sudden, we want to deploy a drone. And you're going to talk a little bit about how we would use that commercially, but also in R&D. So take it away, Igor.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the drone technology fits really nicely in there. There is a bit of overlap in terms of application with the satellite imagery, but it's a nice complementary technology when satellite imagery is not available, like if it's on specific date, cloudy conditions, or things like that. Then you can really go out and fly the field and get a snapshot of what it looks right now in the field. So that's really what the drone imagery is mostly about, like getting the snapshot of exact situation right now today in the field. But it's also can be done on many different levels. So in terms of resolution, so if we were talking before about like 0.5 meter, so 50 centimeters per pixel, with the drone imagery, you can get at least, like if you use multispectral cameras, which are usually have low resolution and fly at highest allowed altitude, you will still get like 6-7 centimeters per pixel. With more high resolution RGB cameras in the popular DJI drones, you get at least 3-4 centimeters. But then if you fly lower, that's where you can really dive into the details and see each individual plant. So you can get down to the millimeter level. So for example, we've seen breeders among our customers who are flying at just 10 meters above the ground, because the trial areas are in vegetable production, to mention. Trial areas are not that big, so you can really fly the whole trial very low and just see every single leaf and every single bug on the plants. So really can get into very, very high resolution. And the process of acquiring the images, it's getting easier and easier. So how it usually goes is you get a drone. Drones usually come with flight planning applications. So you just roughly outline the boundaries of the field, and then the flight route is generated for you automatically, and you just observe how it flies and make sure that you can always see the drone if something unexpected happens, and so on. And then you take many images across the whole field, because usually like one image is not enough to cover the whole area if it's large. And then product like ours can then put together these images almost like a puzzle into one single map of the whole field, and then
You stitch the imagery together, and yeah.
Yep, exactly. And then from there you have this map where you can see like every square foot of the field, and start using different analytics tools depending on what exactly you're looking after.
We had a question come in from the Philippines where they were asking Igor if the technology could be used on a smartphone. And I'm thinking, I've never been to the Philippines, but I'm thinking probably smaller field sizes. This would lend itself to drone technology. And can you talk a little bit about the procedure of the imagery, and then how do you get it back on your smartphone?
Right. So when it comes to our product, it's cloud-based, because some of the analytics, like main analytics that we do, are quite heavy, like require heavy computational power. Like training the AI models, it requires beefy servers with GPUs and all that stuff. So the process, usually you upload the data into the cloud, and then there you can have it processed within anything from a few minutes to maybe an hour or 2 hours, depending on the size of the field.
Does it come back down? Is it a web app or a mobile app?
It's a web app. So you just visit the website, and you can pull it up then while you're at the field and see the maps in the real time there.
Okay, so for everybody listening to, time for an AGvisorPRO commercial. AGvisorPRO can be downloaded on your phone, iOS or Android, and any of these companies, any of these people can be reached on AGvisorPRO. You can set up a meeting on AGvisorPRO. You can reach out to them for a phone call, audio call. You can share pictures, video. You can join our precision ag community. We've got a drone community. We've got a precision ag community. We've got a regenerative community that are all public communities for you to join. So download AGvisorPRO. That's why we're building. Cory, question came in for you around what is the source, and I don't know how to frame this, maybe you can go into it. What is the source of the water and the topography data? So I'm not sure, but the question came in just like that. What is the source of the data?
Yeah, we always require higher resolution elevation. So that's either through RTK GPS or through really good LiDAR.
So are you running RTK for elevation when you're in the field?
In areas that don't have good LiDAR, yeah. And it's not as simple as saying you need RTK. It's like you have to map fields in specific ways as well if you want to capture data correctly. But elevation is just the source of data. After that, we don't use an elevation map for anything. It all goes into our proprietary models to, for example, a depression is not a depression. It could be a flooded depression, a drain depression, or a saline depression. So once it gets into the water modeling in our system, zones are further delineated.
So when you get into the water modeling side, you're really looking at soil structure, salinity, a whole bunch of other factors to kind of determine what kind of a depression it is, right?
Yeah, and just because like an elevation, one of the most probably misunderstood concepts is because elevation is you can record it on anything, like a combine, a tractor, or anything's recording elevation, but it's kind of useless because it doesn't know if it's a depression or a knoll or water shedding or collecting. So, I mean, you could be high elevation and be a depression and low elevation and be a knoll, right? So, yeah, it's never that simple.
So, a depression on top of a hill could be a depression, and it could be wet one year and it could be dry the next year. Like we talked about this earlier, right? This is where the complexity comes in. Kevin, your Intelinair data, and I've got quite a bit of experience in doing this, where we've layered satellite data over top of a field, and 1 year in that depression, the crop is lousy because it's too wet. And the other year, the crop is really good because it's a dry year, but there's enough moisture there. How would you see, and we didn't rehearse this, how would you see leveraging the soil, water, topography maps with Intelinair? Could you be seeing a way to layer these two things together?
Yeah, exactly right. So I mean, Rob, even in AgMRI, we have topography maps from the LiDAR data, right? But it's a map layer, right? And where I see the future possibilities, right, is to be able to causation of that, yield, what we're sensing in that spot this year, like what's causing that, right? And then more things we know about the soil type, the soil structure, the weather that has been happening on that. Those can all come in to help deliver more intelligence, more insights back to the user then. So, I mean, that is one of, I would say, our strategies, right, is to bring in more sets of data to be able to better answer, well, why is it doing what it's doing there right now, right? We're really good at measuring exactly how well that crop is performing. It takes, an agronomist right now to be able to use their knowledge and their intuition to figure out what's driving that. But the more sources that we can come in will better serve them with more information to get to the decision faster.
That's interesting. As an agronomist, I mean, you just said we still have to use our agronomy intelligence, our in-field intuition, our observations. But very often, and Cory, you remember this, you're walking a field of canola and it's in bloom, and you're trying to make a decision on what percentage of bloom and trying to spray on a fungicide, and walking through those fields, we scout by the acre, but we really don't scout the acres. And very often we're not going to the right spot in the field. Like we miss it. We miss it so often. And this is where I think the technology that Kevin is working on is important. Kevin, getting back to the Philippines here, even if we don't have data or ground truth algorithms as to what the problem might be you're seeing, you guys still do anomaly detection. You still do change detection, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep, exactly. And we have a mobile app and web app as well, right? And so, yeah, with that change detection, NDVI is the basic for crop health remote sensing, right? And so that really can work with any crop while we train our models for the emergence and the crop health, a little bit more disease, things like that for corn and soybeans predominantly right now, right? But some of the basics can be applied really to any growing living plant that is out there. So that would work then for any crop for the most part in any geography.
Okay, so to our friend from the Philippines, you can reach out to Kevin on AGvisorPRO and talk to him. I want to talk, Igor, a little bit about ROI, return on investment. And let's focus a little bit on your experience on this. You also are treading in two worlds. You're treading one in the broader farming world, but you're also doing a lot of work with researchers and seed propagators, et cetera. Can you talk to me about what your impressions are about ROI with respect to the technology that you're offering through Solvi Agro?
Right. Yeah, ROI is really different because the use cases where the drone technology can be applied are like so different. If you take the variable rate applications files, like it's really tough to kind of count back maybe investment because you have to wait the whole season until the year yield to know like did it actually pay off to use this approach. There are so many other use cases where like you can see almost immediate return on investment. So if you take, for example, the spot spraying maps, that spot spraying application that is kind of getting quite a lot of traction nowadays in the drone space at least. So not only spot spraying from
talk to us a little bit about that. Like you're identifying the weeds in an area, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you can fly a drone over the field, and if you do that at the specific times of the season, for example, in cereal crops after the harvest, it's pretty easy to spot the thistle spots, for example. And you actually don't even have to have like advanced AI technology to create spraying maps from that. Like we've seen some customers just like taking our like measurement tools and drawing around the patches with weeds and then exporting the shapefile and putting in the tractor. So it can really be very, very hands-on and easy. And like the ROI is very obvious. Like you spray 10, 20, 30% less chemicals.
On the research side, talk to me a little bit about how you you're interfacing with the researchers and providing them with an ROI.
Yeah, and there it's of course like not about high yields or like smaller inputs. It's instead about the time savings and the quality of data that you can collect from the field trials. So traditionally you would do the field trials assessments by like going between the plots and collecting manual notes and then getting back in the office and like relying that those notes were correct, right? And the person who collected them made a objective assessment. So that's far from perfect. With the drones, instead, you can go out and collect the imagery over the trial in a matter of like half an hour and then get back to the office. And from there, you can extract a lot of different data sources.
How tight is the data? How tight is the data, Igor?
In terms
like
of
how fine is the resolution?
Yeah, it's like I mentioned, it's a matter of how high you fly. So some breeders are flying just above like the ground, 8-10 meters, and they can see every single leaf on the leafy greens, for example. If it's a corn trial, for example, you don't have to fly that low, but just to count the corns, like you can have 1,000 plots in a field trial. Like it's technically impossible to count them manually, like every single plot out in the field. With the drone imagery, it's really straightforward. Like you create the map and then the algorithms count the plots, you verify the accuracy, you digitize the boundaries, and then like in a few clicks, you have actual numbers for every single plot. So that's really cool.
One of the questions that came in was, can we detect things under the canopy? And I did last week when I was on the road find a company that was actually dropping like a microphone into the crop and they were able to sense things under the canopy. They were dropping it into the crop, sensing things like carbon dioxide and I don't know what other things. Kevin, let's talk about ROI from Intelinair's perspective, and what's your perspective? Maybe talk to us about farmer, agronomist, retailer ROI.
Yes. So, I mean, the way I describe the ROI from what our solution can provide is essentially the more levers that the farmer has that they can pull throughout the year, right? If they have a fixed management plan and what they're going to do already set, right? Well, then it's a little bit harder. But if they are more of a variable rate nitrogen, right? We have a nitrogen management tool that really utilizes, and sets the efficient use of nitrogen throughout the season. So if you have that available to you as a management tool, well, then the ROI is a lot higher because you can tailor that nitrogen right to exactly what the crop needs based on what you're sensing. If you have, basically a more of a variable plan for fungicide, we can sense the disease and react to that throughout the season as well. So that's really where the ROI comes in from a farmer perspective there, to be able to, go back to that, the G times E times M, right? And be able to give you those decisions that you can make based on the hand you've been dealt that year.
What did you just say? G times E times M?
Yeah, the genotype, the environment, and the management decisions making up the yield, right? So then really that helps you kind of balance those things to give you the most optimized yield for that year based on what you're seeing at that present time. So that's really where the ROI to the farmer comes in, again, based on those things. And then when you look at the analytics, right, throughout the, kind of in the year, at the end of the year, which hybrids, were better performing against disease, which ones did better from an emergence perspective that then led to your yield. So you can make those year over year decisions as well and have a strong ROI on that. For the retailers, it's really a lot more around efficiencies.
Yep.
And how can I cover more acres with less people, essentially, right?
Point my people in the right direction.
Yes, exactly, right? So if I'm monitoring, 50 or 500,000 acres, million acres, right, with a team of people out there, I can be a lot more efficient and give my customers a better service as well, because we're monitoring all those, the full field level and alerting them to the issues and getting the people out there at the right time to correct them. So that's really where the retailers have a good ROI as well. And then probably the one that's a little bit harder to measure for them is just the customer relationship, right? If I can service them better, how much more product am I going to be able to sell as well, and be able to
maybe less product to sell with a
less
better
product, but at a higher margin maybe as well, right? So that's where those things come into play.
Now that's good. When we think about this thing, we like I've got a slide that I talk about, which is VRE, variable rate everything, and nitrogen is one of those things. And right now in Canada, the government is going around talking about nitrous oxide reduction protocols, which I have no problem with. We should be reducing our nitrous oxide if we can. And at the same time, Cory, I got lit up on Twitter pretty hard the other day. The fertilizer study came out, and 62.9% of Western Canadian farmers are still using one blend across all their wheat acres. And I got lit up pretty hard on that, people taking offense to me bringing that to attention. But the reality is we could be doing a lot more with variable nitrogen. So I want to spin back to you, Cory. Let's talk a little bit about some strategies around varying fertilizer and reducing farmer risk and reducing environmental footprint, and kind of moving us along the direction of more sustainable intensification. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess it falls into the previous conversation too, and I know that you've mentioned it, Rob, where like for us, part of the ROI for the farmer is finding areas where there's like nutrients that are just laying there, right? And most commonly that ends up being in areas that collect water. And over time, those are the same areas that have probably collected topsoil from historical erosion and things like that. So, and those, if they're collecting water, that's your mobile nutrients like nitrates are moving there, and probably have higher groundwater tables. And so those are your high risk areas, and may or may not be your high yielding areas if they that could be a problem, or if you're in a very dry land area, it could be a very good thing. So I think depending on where you're at, I think one thing is clear. Farmers can't afford to put these products everywhere. That's number one, right? Farmers aren't against inhibitors. Like if it's going to stabilize nitrogen for them and there's losses, well, they don't want to lose their expensive nitrogen either. But at the same time, they don't need it to spend another, $10 an acre on some product on the top of some hill that's never going to have denitrification because it never gets saturated with water.
Yeah.
So that's probably where I think our best fit is we can identify high risk areas for denitrification. That's the greenhouse gas one, but could be leaching and it could be runoff into, off target areas. We don't want that either. So in general, I mean, when it comes down to it, what's good for the farmer is also good for the environment when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, but it's not that simple either, right? Like if you want to we've done it here, we've put stabilized nitrogen products in different compartments on a cart, or you can maybe even direct inject it with the chem injection system. If you had a liquid product, you can inject on. There's a cost to that, and in most cases, like no one has the cart capacity to now add another product into the tank too. So that creates a logistics problem, hauling fertilizers to the field. And so none of these things are ever simple. It's easy to write them on a piece of paper, but when push comes to shove, there's always a cost, there's always more time, and logistics are challenging. So yeah.
I loved, I think one of your tweets or comments was, I put some intercropping in, I've got rotation, I've minimized my tillage, I've split my nitrogen, I've done variable rate, I've done everything for regenerative ag that I should do, show me the money. And I mean, that was pretty pointed, but you're right. Society wants us to move in a certain direction, and environmentally that all makes sense, but show me the money. Now, I'm going to throw something out back to you that we didn't talk about, Cory, and that is as far back as 2010, 2012, we were documenting the differences in variable rate fertilizer application versus straight application across a field. Back then, with fertilizer prices a lot lower than they are today, commodity prices lower, the return per acre was $35 to $55 per acre on those fields where we deemed precision ag to make some sense. Do you have any gut feel on a field where there is variability, where it makes sense for you to apply your agronomics via SWOT maps, what you think the farmer could get in terms of a investment, 1 to 2 to 1, 3 to 1? What do you think? What's your information telling you, Cory?
Well, I think in a general answer I think we'd love to see an average of 5 to 1 return investment of what people are investing. But the more realistic one that we tend to use now is like a 15% increase in profitability. Now, probably half of that is on cost savings. Every farm we map, you can find 20% of their acres where it's loaded with nutrients, right? Phosphorus, sulfur, maybe even nitrogen, where it's like you could take that money and keep it in the bank. But most often people will find those areas too where there's more opportunity and say, well, I can just reallocate my money over there and make more yield. So that's a very simplistic example, and there's lots of things that can be done, but not everyone has the equipment to do it, right? So, I mean, I can list 10 different things that you could do on any given farm when you have the layers of data that we have that they could do. But everyone should have an electric car too, and we're not out going and buying. Like, you can't afford to do everything. You can't recapitalize your farm overnight to get it all either. So it takes time to hit the 15%, and it's not going to happen every year. If you have a drought, well, that makes it pretty tough. Yeah. If it's too wet, and there'll be some years where it's you'll see killer ROI, and if like we've seen some really bad fusarium years where having super even crops for fungicide application and getting the crops off quick and in the bin and those things made a big difference to people, vomitoxin levels and stuff like that, and made them a lot of money. A
couple of quick questions. We're bouncing off of that right now. One was, does this impact greenhouse gas emissions? And absolutely. I mean, if you can spread out your N, if you can add stabilizers, if you can put N in the crop, if you can use Kevin Intelinair technology to start developing biovegetative index maps or some other technology that assesses chlorophyll and putting nitrogen on accordingly, and then taking it all the way through to desiccation maps. If you're desiccating a field, not all the field needs the same amount of desiccation. Igor, the question came in on does Solvi provide health maps on individual, can you provide field-wide health maps or individual health of plants? And second question for you is, does cloud cover affect your acquisition of the data using drones?
Right. So yeah, it's yes on all questions, like short answer. But yeah, the plant health map on the field level that works, like I mentioned before, like similar to satellite technology, but with high resolution. And also on the plant level, you fly low, you identify every single plant, and you can calculate the same NDVI index as a proxy for plant health to kind of differentiate healthy plants from unhealthy. And when it comes to cloud cover, there is only also like the process for the calibration of the imagery. And that's really common in R&D space, of course, because you want to compare the data over time. And if it's cloudy one day and sunny another day, that will affect the amount of light that they reflect. So there are different techniques to do that. So you can either use the calibration panel that you take the shots of before the flight and after the flight, and then the software will use that to kind of make the necessary adjustments. But then also on some drone models, there is a sunshine sensor sitting on the top that as the drone flies, it measures the incoming light. And then that data is also available in the imagery and can be used to make the necessary adjustments. So you can actually compare the data from today to the previous week, for example, even if the weather conditions are different. Okay,
some of this stuff is getting to be fairly customized in terms of the questions. I want to wrap up. What is the proposed acreage you can fly with a DJI drone in a day? Do you need to go to fixed wing versus multi-rotor wing? I'll leave that question from Jordan to reach out directly to you. I want to conclude. We got just 3 minutes left in the webinar. Why do you do what you do? I'm going to start off with Igor. Why the hell do you do what you do? You just explained to me it takes years and years to develop. Why are you doing this? You're a smart guy. You could do lots of things.
Yeah, I mean, just like from my previous background, I have technical background. So I worked many years with maps and GIS software. So, and then I get fascinated with drones. So that's really what has driven like me to develop this product. And then it turned out that it can be really useful and it's quite meaningful, like leverage that technology in quite simple package so they can be used by users even without the technical background. That's really cool.
Good. Well, I know that you guys have, hopefully you guys have learned a lot from each other on this, and maybe our audience learned it. Kevin, why the hell do you do what you do? You've gone from John Deere to Case, and now you're kind of with Intelinair. They're a startup, but they've raised a lot of money, and you're trying to scale. Why are you doing what you're doing?
Well, I mean, I'm a farm kid, right? So I mean, I think everything I go back to how does this help the farm, right, and be successful? And so that's what I enjoy about it as well, is being able to solve some of those tough problems to really, help unlock the potential of the land to produce more, right, and help people do that. So that's really why I do what I do and why I'm with Intelinair.
Cory, you're one of the stubbornest people I know. You're a tenacious entrepreneur. You don't hold back. Why do you do what you do? This isn't easy. Why do you do what you do?
Well, same thing. I was just a farm kid, and agronomy is what I enjoyed. And working in the field for 10 years as an agronomist, I just saw that there was a more precise way of doing things and the way it was being done. And so, yeah, pursued that passion, and here we are, still being stubborn at trying to solve problems, I guess.
Well, I've got a couple exits under my belt, and people say, Rob, you should be retired. And I said, well, you haven't seen my golf game, and there's not enough motorcycle days to ride. So I've started AGvisorPRO. People say, what the hell are you doing? I said, well, somebody is going to change the way agriculture transforms how agriculture connects on the planet Earth. And I want to thank all of you for being on AGvisorPRO. Thanks for being on the panel today. I think we had a really, really insightful panel. Anybody who's kind of in this agricultural precision ag space would have gotten something from today's panel and today's discussion. Kevin Krieg with Intelinair, they're available. And then Igor out of Sweden, so worldwide. And Cory, thanks a lot for spending some time with us today on the webinar. And hopefully we've been able to help everybody do a better job of making the precision decision. Download AGvisorPRO, connect to all of these people and companies on AGvisorPRO, join our precision ag community or our drone community on AGvisorPRO, and we'll see you on the next webinar with AGvisorPRO. Over and out.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.